There are moments when life feels like a storm that never passes. When your knees have kissed the dirt so many times, you've forgotten what it feels like to stand tall. When betrayal doesn't come from enemies, but from those you prayed for. And in that darkness, when silence is loudest and no one comes to help, there's a message waiting just for you. God sees you. He sees the weight you carry, the invisible wounds, the silent cries. And he says, you were meant to rise. It began with silence, a silence too deep for comfort. Elena stood on the edge of her balcony, the city lights flickering far below, too distant to touch her night. She wasn't thinking of jumping. No, she wasn't that kind of broken. But something in her soul had already fallen. Hard, deep, without a sound. Just 6 months ago, everything was different. She had a stable job, a fiancé who promised forever, and a small art studio that felt like heaven on earth. But life has a way of twisting dreams until they look like nightmares. First came the job loss. Downsizing, they said. Budget cuts. But deep inside, she knew it was because her boss never liked how she stood up for the intern who was being mistreated. Her integrity cost her everything. Then, just 2 weeks later, her fiancé, Daniel, left. No warning. No fight. Just a cold message. I'm not the man you think I am. Goodbye. The betrayal shattered her. And the art studio? That was a final blow. A fire unexplained. Everything she had poured her soul into, gone in an evening of smoke and ash. People started whispering that she was cursed, that God had turned his face from her, that maybe she had done something to deserve this chain of tragedies. But what they didn't know was the war raging inside her heart. Every night, she would curl up on the floor, gripping her knees to her chest, whispering into the emptiness, God, if you're real, where are you? And then one night came the voice, not loud, not booming, but firm. You were meant to rise. She shot up from her mattress, heart pounding. Was it a dream? A memory? A hallucination from the hunger she'd been ignoring? But the words echoed, over and over. You were meant to rise. She didn't understand it, not at first. Rise from what? From pain? From betrayal? How could she, when everything around her was falling apart? But something stirred, a flicker, like a candle refusing to die out even in the harshest wind. She opened the Bible she hadn't touched in years. It wasn't deliberate. It just happened. Her hand moved on its own, like something invisible had gently nudged her toward it, and her eyes landed on this. Isaiah 60, verse 1. Arise, shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord rises upon you. Her breath caught. Could it be? A sign? A divine whisper reminding her that buried beneath the ashes, something still lived? The next morning, she got up early. Not because she had somewhere to be, but because she felt something unfamiliar. A purpose. It didn't make sense. She still had no job, no home of her own, and her heart still bruised and tender. But the weight felt lighter. She began walking to the local park. She didn't know why. Maybe it was to escape the four suffocating walls of her apartment. Maybe it was the call of fresh air. But as she walked past a woman selling handmade scarves, something clicked. The designs were beautiful, but rough, not quite finished. Elena, despite the tremble in her fingers, asked, Do you need help with patterns? The woman looked surprised. You know embroidery? I'm an artist, she said softly. At least, I was. That afternoon turned into a week into a month, and slowly, she began helping the woman refine her designs. In return, she was offered food, friendship, and a small space to paint again. And it wasn't just painting. It was healing. Each stroke of the brush was like an exhale of the pain she had carried. The studio may have been gone, but the artist within her wasn't. Yet, just as she began to rebuild, the shadows returned. Daniel showed up again. He stood in the park one morning, his face pale, eyes glassy. I messed up, he whispered. I thought walking away would fix me. But all it did was destroy you. And me. Elena stared at him. The old ache tried to return, but this time, something stronger pushed it back. No, she said gently. You didn't destroy me. You only revealed who I was meant to become." And she walked away. Tears fell that night, not out of sadness, but release. She was no longer clinging to people who didn't fight to stay, no longer begging God to fix what was never hers. Instead, she thanked him for the lessons, because in every closed door, there had been a divine purpose. In every betrayal, a redirection. In every breakdown, a sacred rebuilding. That voice, the one that whispered, "You were meant to rise," wasn't just for Elena. It's for you. For the one listening right now, who's been surrounded by loss, disappointment, and wounds no one sees. You may feel buried, forgotten, abandoned. But what if you're not buried? What if you're planted? And growth takes time. Darkness, rain, stillness. But the roots are deepening. The stem is strengthening. And soon the bloom will come. You weren't meant to stay down. You weren't created to be broken forever. The pain was real, but so is your resurrection. God never said the fire wouldn't come, but he did promise you wouldn't burn alone. So when the voices around you say you failed, when the people you trusted walk away, when the night feels endless, remember this. God says you were meant to rise, and rise you will. When you start to rise, don't expect applause. Don't expect the people who watched you fall to celebrate your climb. Often, the loudest silence comes not when you're broken, but when you begin to heal. That's when the true test begins. Because rising isn't just about standing up. It's about staying up when everything tries to pull you down again. And God says, keep going. You're almost there. Months had passed since Elena walked away from Daniel and chose herself her peace over the chaos of false promises. The art collaboration with the scarf vendor had flourished into something unexpected. Tourists began buying the uniquely designed fabrics, and soon a local boutique offered to feature their work. For the first time in a long time, Elena felt worthy again. Not because someone said so, not because someone stayed, but because she had fought for that worth in the silence of her suffering. Her pain had birth purpose. But healing, as she'd learned, is never linear. With success came whispers again. The same people who called her cursed now called her lucky. They didn't know the nights she had cried into her pillow, the mornings she had forced herself to rise even when her soul screamed for rest. Then came the opportunity of a lifetime, an invitation from a prestigious gallery, the Lumina House of Art, to showcase her latest series, Ashes to Ascension, a collection of paintings born from her darkest nights, each canvas soaked in grief, growth, and glimpses of grace. Elena stared at the email in disbelief. This wasn't just an exhibit. It was redemption. But fear clawed at her ribs. What if they don't like it? What if they see my pain as weakness, not strength? What if I fail? That night, she sat by the window, her mind a storm. And again came a voice. Did you rise by your own strength? She froze. It wasn't accusatory. It was gentle, like a reminder. I was with you in the fire. Tears spilled freely. How could she forget when she lost everything? She didn't crawl out by sheer willpower. It was grace. It was divine mercy. The unseen hands that held her through sleepless nights. The whisper that kept her going. The breath in her lungs when she didn't want to wake up. She whispered into the darkness, I remember now. And peace, the kind that passes all understanding, filled the room. The weeks leading up to the exhibit were a whirlwind. Interviews, preparations, critics, media. And yet, through it all, Elena stayed grounded. Not in fame, not in validation, but in faith. She painted one final piece of the gallery. It was different from the others. Less darkness, more light. A figure standing tall in the center of a storm. Rain poured, lightning cracked, but the figure didn't fall. The eyes were closed, the arms open, and from the chest, a golden glow, like the sun had been born inside the storm itself. She titled it, You Were Meant to Rise. Opening night arrived. The gallery buzzed with anticipation. Lights sparkled. Strangers gathered. The once cursed girl was now the artist everyone talked about. But something unexpected happened. Just an hour into the event, an older woman approached her. Wrinkled hands, teary eyes. She clutched her cane with trembling fingers and pointed at the final painting. "That's me," the woman whispered. "I lost my son last year. I thought I'd never survive. But that's exactly how it felt. Like something inside me refused to die, even when everything else did." Elena didn't say a word. She just reached out and embraced her. And one by one, more people came. A man who had just been released from prison. A teenage girl fighting depression. A widow. A soldier. A nurse. All drawn to that painting. All touched in a way Elena had never anticipated, because her story had become their mirror. And that's when she understood. This wasn't about fame or fortune. This was ministry. God had taken her pain and turned it into healing, not just for her, but for others. But just when she thought the story had reached its peak, came the final twist. Daniel returned again, only this time not to beg. He had come to deliver something. A letter from her old boss, the one who had fired her. It read, "Elena, I owe you an apology. We made a mistake. We silenced the one voice that stood for what was right. I've been following your art journey, and I've seen what happens when someone refuses to break. If you're ever willing, I would be honored to work with you again, not as your boss, but as your student." Elena stared at the letter, her hands trembling. Her past was no longer chasing her. It was now respecting her. And in that moment, she realized, when God says you were meant to rise, it means even the things that buried you will one day testify to your strength. You, yes, you, reading this, listening to this, you may feel like your story is over, like the betrayals, the heartbreaks, the disappointments have written your final chapter. But hear this, God is not finished with you yet. That storm you're in, it's not to drown you. It's to water the seeds of something greater inside you. You were not meant to stay broken. You were not meant to stay hidden. You were meant to rise. Like Elena, you may not understand the why in the middle of your pain, but one day you'll look back and see how every tear carved the path that led to your purpose. The fire didn't burn you. It refined you. The silence didn't kill you. It taught you to listen deeper. The loss didn't break you. It opened doors you never would have walked through otherwise. So take a deep breath and rise, because the same God who whispered to her is whispering to you now. You were meant to rise. And when you do, don't be surprised if your light helps someone else find their way home.